Hey, good morning. Good morning, everyone. Aparna, welcome to the Lumiere Torchbearer Thursday.
Thank you.
Happy New Year to you. This is the very first Torchbearer Thursday we are doing, and what an honor and privilege to have you on the show this year.
Happy New Year to you too, Deepa. It's wonderful to meet you online. I guess, you know, I- we have over the last few years met physically off and on, but I think this is also a wonderful way to catch up, especially in these COVID times.
Absolutely. And when I meet you, and I miss Singapore so much.
Mm,
So trying to make the diaries work and always have a catch up to listen to what Aparna and Patients Engage are doing. So I'd like our viewers today to know that Vijay Bhatt, who is a common friend, founder of Cancer Awakens, introduced us some years ago. And for some reason, I thought it was Vineet Taneja because of the IIM connection, IIM Cal connection that you share with him, and the levers connection I share with Vineet. So this morning, when I was trying to think, and I said, I must tell my viewers the context of how we met, because a lot of people are very curious to know how do these fantastic people come onto your show. So that seems to be a common refrain. So I've decided to plug that in right in the beginning so people
right.
So, Aparna,
Thanks.
you did conventional things, corporate after IIM. So, tell us a little bit about when did this patients engage thought, the germ of the idea come to you, and how did it begin? And for our viewers, uh, we'll listen to how all of this comes together for this person and this platform to happen. I mean,
Right. Thank you, Deepa. Um, so yeah, as you said that I had a typical corporate career. After my IIM, I was in technology for about 25 years. And the last role that I was doing, I was in NIIT, Oracle, and another French company that used to service the life sciences sector. And as I used to do that and talk to my life sciences clients about what they thought of their role in the journey of a patient, I realized that they were so focused on the healthcare professionals. And then I started researching. I was also approaching my midlife crisis of getting to the 25-year mark. And as I studied the healthcare sector, I realized that the patient who should be at the center of healthcare and is one of the most disempowered stakeholders. The other thing is that I am fundamentally a fairly curious person. So if somebody, in the office had a cancer, or somebody else had a condition, or some family member had something, I would go up online and look up for information. And I soon realized that it was not enough to look at the the platforms like a Mayo Clinic and WebMD. They are important, uh, but they do not tell you what the person who's dealing with the condition goes through. So what was missing in those that piece of information was lived experiences. And I felt that that is a extremely important aspect of especially chronic conditions where you live with a condition for a very long time. So I guess that's kind of the germ of the idea to put together a platform, a space for patients and family caregivers who are managing chronic conditions.
very, very interesting that you should find this sort of sweet spot that while there's a lot of information out there, maybe these lived experiences is what you really wanted people to talk about and feel empowered just through the knowing that there is someone else.
Correct. Yeah. So I think there are two things that lived experiences give you. One is that they tell you that you're not alone. Someone out there is also going through the same thing. But also, over a period of time, as we have talked to different people with the same condition, right? So, hypothetically, if you take, say, breast cancer, if you talk to 30 different women with breast cancer and each tells their own story, there are similarities, but there are also differences. And you realize that the power of the different journeys is something that needs to be captured, because you cannot deal with a condition as a single narrative.
Yeah.
Each narrative has its own uh, value, and it is unique. So I think we need to acknowledge that it's not a single straight line of a condition, and each one deals with it differently.
I was uh, this clarity that you have, that it is patients at the center, what does it mean for other stakeholders and participants to the platform who are non-patients, like the entire health and wellness ecosystem? If I were to look at it, how do they
Right.
view patients engage? Do they see themselves as participants? Do they see themselves on the outside? I'm curious.
So I think it's been quite interesting. We have had, so, the more I talk about the platform to even established doctors, etc., nobody denies the need for something like this. They all say, yes, of course. Some have even come up and said, you know, we should have been doing this.
Hmm.
Uh, but, it's good to know that you are doing it. Um, they do worry about the fact that what will patients get out of it, and which is where we are very proud of the fact that we are very careful about the information we put out. Even in terms of personal narratives, we will check for whether it's evidence based, whether it can potentially be harmful to put out there. And so we are very, very careful. And so, it is a moderated, curated, evidence based information that we put out. And I think that reassures the medical fraternity. What we also do is, we are not just talking of lived experiences, right? So we also supplement that information with all of the others. So
Hmm.
for instance, it's not, if you are someone who has a orthopedic condition, or you are someone with a neuro condition, it's not just about the medication, right? It is about the therapy, the rehab, etc. So those aspects also need to be talked about. So there are different players in this whole the health ecosystem, which often people don't recognize and acknowledge. So that's the other part. There's also, of course, the role of diet and nutrition, which is increasingly being understood, and the role of exercise, fitness, and they all play an important role. So I think we pull together all of that when we look at what will help a patient, and not just about their medical treatment.
Very interesting. When you said on this 7-year journey now, right?
Yeah, six done. Yeah, so, I mean, 7 years since I quit my corporate job. Yes.
So, like they say in this, you were starting this in Singapore. How might patients engage have been different? Were you doing this out of India? I'm just
So effectively, about 70% of our um, platform audience is from India.
okay.
About I think more than 90% of our lived experiences are from India.
Wow. Okay.
So, yeah, I think over time we found that the the gap that is there in terms of health literacy, the gap that is there in terms of the information asymmetry, so much higher in a place like India as opposed to a place like Singapore, that it was much more valuable and
Very.
impactful to kind of service the Indian community.
I Each time I meet Aparna, I must tell the audience, I always marvel at her clarity. There's crystal clear thinking that you see laid out. There isn't that. temptation of saying, okay, I will talk about me being global. No, she's always talks about why the information is asymmetry. And if you, it's very interesting, Aparna, you also have content in Hindi. So you want to tell
Yes,
our viewers about that?
sure. So 2020 was a year where we started Hindi content. And so, yeah, we've been working at it thanks to a friend of mine who does not like to be named, but she was after me for a while that, you have to add content in Indian languages. So we've started Hindi. We do want to add Bengali. So, one of the call to actions for people out there is if you would like to help on translations or, any other way, happy to. Um, I mean, we'll come to it, but during COVID for the webinars, we did one series where I think we did almost 10 languages on kidney information. So, yeah, so we've been trying to cover languages beyond English for sure. And Hindi, we've done quite a bit in the last year. Even a lot of our webinars we do in both English and Hindi, as well as, yeah, as you said, the written content on the website also now has a fair amount of Hindi now.
And you also have audio in
Yes.
the website too. So tell us about that.
So that was something that it the thought first came up um, when, because we also deal with disabilities, because we find that disability is not something that is the traditional expectation of disability, right? Often people acquire disabilities. You may be born with it or you may acquire it, and the journeys are different. But they kind of coexist with chronic conditions as well. So when we do disabilities, again, another person who I've kind of come to know and respect, she would often talk about how a lot of sites are not accessible, and we would periodically check. So we knew that the site was readable for people who are using technology. If they're blind and they're using technology for it. But what we realized when we were doing Hindi content was that there would be a whole segment of people who would actually not be that comfortable reading Hindi.
Hmm.
And to read medical information in Hindi is actually quite tedious. Even for us, as we were reviewing and translating, it was not easy. So we said that why not look at audio options, and then we tried a few and finally nailed down on one, and then we added it to the whole site. We said, why would we restrict it to only for the Hindi content? We just added it to the whole site. So yes, I think it does help people who would rather just listen to the content and not read it, or would have challenges reading it. So
So the techie in you smiles at what as parts of your platform. What gives you pride?
So the tech part is to me like a baseline. It's not something that gives me pride. I think the pride in for us comes in the fact that we are able to help people dealing with different conditions really understand that they are not alone, and understand that uh, it's okay to have a journey which is different from someone else's journey. And we have over time talked about topics like grief. In fact, we've just started a grief community because, again, grief and loss is an integral part of life, but also chronic diseases. And we had a couple of mothers who had written uh, their experiences of losing a child, and the two of them also kind of convinced me that it made sense to allow more people to talk about it. So, I mean, yeah, there is no, to me, I do not look at it. I mean, for instance, when we started, people said you're doing way too many conditions, right? You should only do diabetes or you should only do cancer. And our experience again was that nobody lives with only one condition. So why should they have to go to 5 different platforms to find the information they need? Um, And in fact, a small survey we did said on an average, a caregiver looks at 2.3 or 2.4 persons. And therefore, if you add the number of conditions each of them has, then it's even more, right? So it made no sense to do that. So yeah, what gives me joy, I guess, is being able to synthesize the information we glean from various narratives, but also the new ideas, new concepts out there, and how we can assimilate and put it in a language that is easy to understand for a layperson.
How did these conditions sort of grow as you were building? Were you starting with diabetes and heart and hypertension, and did it sort of organically, or did you come with a neuro bias to say, let me do things which people don't know much about? How was it for you?
So we started with three. We started with three fairly common ones, right? We started with diabetes, cancer, and arthritis.
Okay.
Um, but over time, it just grew organically. If somebody would read uh, a story on, uh, say, cancer, and then come back and say, you should also write about this, or you should also, I want to share my story about. Uh, Say Parkinson's, right? And we never said no,
Hmm.
because it was not, it's not our place to say no. And over time we kept, I think, as you said, it's organic. Every narrative led us to look for another story of the same type or something else which was similar. Um, we finally put together a lot of them under, like, we started rare diseases because somebody said, talked about it, and then we didn't even put it together into one bucket, but we recently did finally decide to put it under one bucket. So yeah, I think the narratives just organically grow with each other. Sometimes in one story of someone with uh, autism, you'll find a mention of epilepsy, and then you say, okay, let's look at epilepsy. So, and then somebody with cerebral palsy will also talk of pediatric epilepsy. So, you then look at, or somebody with Parkinson's will talk of dementia, or somebody who has been on uh, drugs for mental health or mental illnesses will talk of versions of Parkinson's. So it kind of evolves over time. And, as I said, we are a curious bunch. So when somebody talks about this as a side effect of that, we go searching and reading up and researching. And then we say, okay, this deserves to be looked at further. So, yes.
And have you stayed a little more towards the allopathic side in your discourse, or are you more embracing the holistic? How has it been for you? Where does
So,
your belief come?
so I think I kind of don't see holistic as different from allopathic. Um, I think what we look at is evidence based.
Okay.
So if we can find evidence which is documented and researched, we would be happy to talk about anything else. We do talk of complementary so long as it doesn't interfere. So, for instance, we actively talk about the role of yoga. We actively talk about the role of exercise, fitness, walking. All of that is, to us, definitely part of the holistic. Nutrition and diet is an important part of the holistic. What we are very careful about, and again, because we look for the evidence, is if we can find, for instance, you know, so for years, as an example, we did not, we were careful about using the term diabetes reversal, right? Because it while we were seeing examples and we were hearing of a few odd cases, there wasn't enough evidence on a wider scale to be able to say, yes, you know, uh, 5% weight loss leads to diabetes reversal, or it leads to at least, and even the term of reversal has over the last 5 years evolved, right? So it's no more that you are off all medication. But if you see a drop in your medication usage or you go off insulin, then it's considered diabetes reversal. So we have now talked about it because we are seeing enough evidence of it. We see enough research and we know exactly, not exactly, but enough now to say what, under what circumstances those reversals happen.
Very interesting. So, when you read old books on naturopathy and, you come across things like importance of fasting, things, or importance of magnets. Do these aspects, have you covered any of these topics which people might be curious about and interested in asking?
So fasting, yes, and we probably plan to do more, but it's a complex topic. Um, I mean, at the end of the day, fasting is essentially, and let's not go into that. But yeah, I think fasting, yes, we are looking at it as to what elements of fasting, and how, again, what's the evidence on it. Uh, Magnets, no, I think so far we haven't seen enough evidence to talk about things like that.
Aparna, you are now doing a lot of interviews, and I think you've also done a lot of these during the times of COVID. So, what changed for you? What accelerated? What decelerated during the this year, 2020?
Yeah, so I think we did our first webinar in October of 2018, which is more than 2 years ago, using the same technology of Zoom and Facebook. And we've been doing those, I think we were doing one a month or sometimes two a month, all through 2019. 2020 obviously changed a lot of that. So I remember we did the first, so when, I think it was in March when, I mean, yeah, since I'm in Singapore, COVID kind of hit us. We were aware of COVID from Jan itself, right? But it wasn't affecting day to day life. People were expecting it to be like the original SARS that happened. Uh, but in March, we started clearly knowing that it's going to be much more than what SARS was. And we did our first webinar on what is COVID on March 20th. And we were already kind of aware of the fact that there is a mental health aspect to it. So even in that first webinar, we had not just a researcher, but we also had a mental health professional in that first webinar. But we soon realized that with the lockdown and so on, people were very concerned, right? So their standard of care had got disrupted. All of their routine checkups, all of their visits for dialysis, all of their even things like going out for a walk, going to the gym, all of that was affected. And the term comorbidity had kind of suddenly become, everybody's buzzword, right? So um, everybody had bunch of questions. There was also the shortage of HCQS for uh, rheumatic condition patients. And we realized that there were a bunch of questions that needed to be answered. So we put together a series of short 25 to 30-minute sessions on how to deal with various chronic conditions during the lockdown. And I think we did that. I think in 2 weeks, we probably covered some 10 such sessions. Um, so that kind of started it. And over time, I think we found obviously people had become much more comfortable with Zoom. So we did a whole bunch of series. So we ended the year with having done, I think, about 64 webinars
Wow.
across a wide range of conditions, from organ donation to home-based dementia care to autism dads and various cancer aspects and kidney disease and diabetes and rheumatic diseases and so on. So yeah, I think we just and we did multiple languages as well.
That's phenomenal, and congratulations to you and your team. That must have called for a huge amount of planning and execution to happen, but to put all this together.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it was, again, it was about constantly listening to what people were talking about. So if they were talking about the challenges of, a lot of the dementia care centers closed down. So what do they do about it? A lot of the therapists had stopped going to people's homes for therapy. So how were people supposed to cope with it? Plus, mental health was again a whole area of, so we did stuff on pandemic burnout and so on as well. So yeah, I think it's about constantly listening to what people are talking about and what they're concerned about.
Awesome. So, Aparna, we're in the last 4 minutes of the segment. We've
Hmm.
taken down the torchbearer now to half an hour from our standard 45 minutes. Tell us, what is your call for action? What is it that you would like the listeners and the community to do more of or less of? How can we engage? How can we participate with Patients Engage?
Right. So I think Patients Engage would not be where it is um, without the team we have, but also without the collaboration with so many patients and caregivers who've lent their voices, using our platform. So many patient leaders and advocates who have collaborated with us. So many NGOs, so many uh, healthcare professionals or helping professional therapists, doctors, uh, mental health counselors, nutritionists, etc. Um, so I think the point really is that we are an extremely collaborative platform. So if you, I guess, to whoever is listening, if you are someone who has a condition, go check out the platform. If you are someone who would like to share an experience, you can always write into us. If you're someone who would like to look at ways to collaborate and reach a wider audience, or work together to, if you're a patient group that wants to get their insights across or wants to be heard, again, we are very collaborative. We do talk to various people, and again, as I said, all the insights we gain are not me just sitting and figuring things out, right? It is us talking to all of these people who generously share their time to make sure that we understand various aspects of their condition. um, and so yeah, I think if any of you would like to, please do reach out. And we're always looking for ideas. We would want corporates to take a bigger role in supporting health of uh, everybody. I think their own employees, their we want CSR to do more on chronic disease management, because it's not enough to put a doctor in one place or to provide a mobile van. There needs to be much more that CSR could do. So and we are happy to provide you ideas that you can leverage as well. But I think we all need to do a lot more. And again, health for us is not just the medical aspect. It is the emotional aspect, the psychosocial aspect, as well as the overall well-being.
So we've had some comments over here. Neha says, great to begin the day with you all. Veena says, very informative talk. Admire the dedication of the team. So quite likely hopefully this video is going to get shared and more people will know about Patients Engage. And Aparna, you also mentioned about people who want to volunteer with language and
Right.
translations.
Correct, absolutely. So
And
yeah,
Bengali is the language, the next language that you're
yeah,
looking.
we are not selective. If you want to do Marathi, please come and tell us. But yeah, any Hindi, Bengali, Marathi, whatever language that works for you, we are quite happy to.
Yeah, so Shekru, if you're listening, Anand Krishna, if you're listening, Barathi, they are open because they work with farmers of Maharashtra.
Okay.
They would be, and they are keen to take health as one big platform,
Right.
and to talk about it to their cohort, to their TG.
Right.
They've got a
Yeah.
bunch of videos and audios as well. So this is a great place even for content sharing and things that can happen. So it doesn't have to be only urban. It's
Absolutely.
very, very accessible. So
Correct. Correct. And
so
as you know, and more than I think 85-90% of our audience comes on mobile. So,
exactly. So it's light, and
right.
Anant again is a techie like you. So I'm happy to connect you. I don't think
Sure.
he's watching, but he will probably little later today.
Right.
Aparna, thank you so much for coming here today. That was very, very insightful for our audience. There is over 100,000 people, 110,000 people, Aparna, on the platform, the community.
Yeah, I think the extended community goes beyond. I think we probably reached last year about 1 million people, because when you put up on videos on Facebook and YouTube, they go further than just the registered. 110,000 is the registered base. So, uh,
Superb. And more power to you and your team. And I hope to have you come here maybe at least once a year for sure, so that more people know and fresh new people get connected with the platform. So thank you
sure.
once again.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Deepa, for having me over. And yeah, I think what you do as, giving a platform to so many different interesting people has always been very interesting for me to, occasionally catch on when I'm not running my own webinars. But it's always been very interesting and always gives ideas. So thank you for what you do as well.
Thank you. Thank you, Aparna. Good luck. Have a
Thank you.
great year. Bye bye.
Bye.